how to approach the topic at all. And I'm going to hand it over to Kelly because she has something for this.
Wow, what a day so far. I think you have really been inundated with some amazing presentations, but not just that. I think it's so much deeper and so much more thorough than we really think about. You know, we talked this morning about how being a preservation expert is a calling. It's not necessarily a career. And that's sort of what I want to talk about first. Before I talk about myself, I would really like to talk about us. I think there needs to be some safe space conversation. But before we get started, I put a picture of Bill Quackenbush's desk on my presentation, because this is truly the reality of what your day looks like, right? Especially if you're a historic preservation officer. I don't know how many federal agencies that I have actually gone to the table and they're like, well, I don't understand, you know, why Edith Leoso never responds to my letters. I don't understand. There's just, you know, they're just, you know, well, because you're not the only agency sending tribes letters. But let's just step beyond that for 1 second, because that's not really what I wanted to talk about. This is really about music being medicine for me. It's my journey. But before I go there, I really want to show you how music can really create some space for you. As historic preservation professionals, we are doing work in ways that doesn't just touch ourselves and our staff, but it's our community, it's our spirit, it's our future. This isn't a career, it's something that we do. And oftentimes you find yourself in front of tribal leaders or tribal advisors trying to advocate for the preservation and protection of our own resources. We don't talk about these things in this circle. We like to beat up federal agencies, but sometimes we are actually beating up one another, trying to convince each other that there's value in preservation. We have to create balance. And to do that takes incredible strength and perseverance. You are sometimes in front of elders, you're in front of advisors, and you're getting information from them, information that sometimes is not easy to process. Sometimes you are talking to elders that are crying. You are talking to community members that are struggling, and this is a real part of what we do every day. Sometimes you are literally on your knees begging for protection of our ancestral remains, which we just listened to a very technical and very challenging presentation on NATHPO. This is what we do. And I can promise you, this is what we'll continue to do, and there will always be the danger of mixing that emotional space. It is really important to pay attention to not just your physical health, your mental health, but your spiritual health as you go on this journey of preservation and protection for your own communities. And I just wanted to sincerely share my own journey with you. But coming together at places like this is about creating safe space. And something that Valerie really, really impressed me with is when I spoke with her about talking about the boarding school, she really, really wanted this to be safe space. Conversation that we all first need to understand how stressful and how difficult our profession can be. And again, it's not a profession. It is our existence. It literally is who we are, not just today and the past, but it is our future. It's our culture. But even deeper than that, it's leaving a legacy that long lives beyond this room. And I think that that's a really serious obligation to carry. So I wanted to let you all know that I'm on this journey with you, but I also want you to do a mental check every once in a while. This is stressful. And what I'm about to talk about is even more stressful. It's more emotional. It's more physically draining. And when I went on this journey to meet elders and to talk to community members, it really was the most challenging part of my career. So what I'm going to talk about today, and I'm going to try to do it quickly because I put an hour and a half talk into 45 minutes already, and we're a little running behind. So I'm going to do the best I can. But today is going to be about talking about a legacy of survival. This is about our boys dormitory interpretive center, which is one of the government boarding schools in Lac du Flambeau, and my journey on taking myself to get there. I want to talk about the residual effects because I had very eye-opening moments along the journey that I took about the residual effects of boarding schools. And I do not want to leave us on a sad note because all of that is really deep. I would like to talk about what I am doing personally to make a difference in those areas of impact. And so before we wrap up, I want to sure to do that. And then we also want to give you a chance to give NATHPO some guidance on now what? What can we do? What should we do? What role does the National Association have in the legacy of survival or in the boarding school era itself? I don't want to talk too much about myself because I already introduced myself, but I will say that I was a historic preservation professional for the better part, historic preservation officer for the better part of 15 years. And from that, I moved into other spaces, which I went to the dark side and started working for the state. And then I went even darker and started working for corporate America. And then I just said, you know what? I'm just going to be a rock star. Forget this. So that's what I did. And it really wanted to talk about how that happened, because the true story is the way that this happened for me is because of the boarding school. The way that I came into music and I realized how powerful it was and how it could help me along the way was because of this building right here. This building stands on Highway 47 in the middle of my community in Lac du Flambeau, northern Wisconsin. It is a building that has been used for a lot of other things. And as a child, I didn't know what this building was. I thought it was the Niji Center. It's where we went for our sobriety powwows once a year. We have feasts there. It wasn't for a while later that I learned that this was the boys' dormitory building, one of the remaining structures from the government boarding school era itself. And even then, I really didn't understand a lot. So what did I do? I went out and talked to people. I talked to elders all across the continent. And I can tell you there were some moments where I was a very shocked young woman. And I spent the better part of a decade interviewing elders. The women up on the screen are Celia and Riva. They're elders from our community, and they have told me many stories about their experience at the Lac du Flambeau boarding school. But the other thing that we started to do is, besides talking to people, we started to actually do what's called selective demolition. We started pulling things off of the building and started unveiling what the building originally looked like. Imagine what that space would have been like for the boys that were forced to attend. What we found in the walls spoke to us. Material culture, we talk about artifacts and those things. Same thing, we did archaeology outside the boarding school. And again, it just sort of, this is very interesting. And at that time, I think my daughter was around 4, and this is my son. He actually wanted to be an architect. So we worked with our historic architect as part of this project. Now, I want to just back up for 1 second because I want to say, in our community, there weren't a lot of people that were really supportive of putting this building back together and telling the story. Take a guess why. There were so many people that said, I want you to burn that building down and scatter it across the ground, and I never want to see it again. And I thought, well, that makes total sense. Except my son didn't know what that building was, and I didn't know what that building was. And if it's gone, the residual effects from that building are still here, I promise you. The physical part is gone. Our ability to tell our story from our perspective, I felt was so powerful if we could do something with the building itself. And so as I went out and talked to elders, I got more and more commitments from our community to make this such an important part of the process. And I want to tell you a story because this is the part where my heart and my mind and my spirit got very heavy in my job, right? In my career, what I did for the tribe. I was sent to the National Archives in Chicago to gather information on the boarding school and find out specifically as much information as I could on Lac du Flambeau. And so we were pulling records from, various different places. And I came across this letter that was written by Charlie Catfish. Charlie Catfish was a tribal member that lived in Lac du Flambeau in the Old Village. He spoke English in the late 1800s, and his neighbor did not. So he wrote a letter, and this isn't exactly what it said, but I can't help but remember. He said, "I'm writing this letter on behalf of my neighbor. She does not speak English. She would like to know what right you had to come to her home and take her child. He is not old enough to go to boarding school. He's still nursing, and he was ill." And I remember looking down at my daughter at that moment, and I'm trying to imagine what it would have been like for someone to come into my home and take my daughter. In that moment, I started to dismantle all of the technical stuff I was building as a historic preservation professional. I was consulting with historic architects, and I broke it down even deeper. And I thought, what is it that we're really trying to do? A few years later, I found a letter that was written in response. The superintendent sent a letter back to Charlie Catfish, and he said, "Mr. Catfish, I have to tell you that there are no sick children in the school today. And frankly, all of the parents are dishonest about the age of their children. And so if they meet the stick height we consider 5, they must go to school." What I also started to unveil in that story is a couple of quotes that really hit me. "It is a great mistake to think that the Indian is born an inevitable savage. He is born a blank, like all the rest of us. Left in surroundings of savagery, he grows to possess a savage language, superstition, and life. We, left in the surroundings of civilization, grow to possess a civilized language, life, and purpose." That is exactly the words that started to formulate an idea that they could save the man, kill the Indian. And this was Lieutenant Henry Pratt's first attempt at doing that in Fort Marion after the Red River War. He took the prisoners of war and said, "I can recreate and turn these men into productive members of civilization." And it was an example that spread all across the country. It was a model that was not only applied in the United States. Canada thought it was a great idea after the United States did it. And Australia thought it was even a better idea, and they kept doing it until the early 70s. And I'm not going to go into life at the boarding school because I don't have time, but I would like to share stories about, more specifically what it was like for some of the elders that I spoke to. But I want to tell one story about an interview that I did in Lac du Flambeau, because it was the moment in my life where I realized I knew nothing about residual effects or historical trauma. We use those words all the time. I'm not really sure if I even understood. But my uncle called me and he said, "Kelly, I want you to come and interview me. I want you to talk to me about the boarding school." And I said, "Uncle, you're in your 60s. You're not old enough to have gone to the boarding school in Lac du Flambeau." And he said, No, I want you to come and interview me. I'm your elder, come interview me. So, I bring my little handy dandy tape recorder. For you young people in the room, tape recorder is a little thing you used to carry with little cassettes that, anyway, baby's on it. But brought my tape recorder, sat down, I had my questions that I was asking elders and community members, and I sat down and I started answering questions, and he said, No, I don't want to talk about any of that. I want to tell you a story. I said, okay. So in Lac du Flambeau, we have a school on the reservation, and you go to that school until you are just out of middle school. And it is 100% almost, maybe 94% indigenous population. And from there, you go to high school in Lakeland, where you become 2%, and you are now a minority for the first time in your life. And we have lots of transitional issues because it's many times a culture shock for our students. In any case, my uncle is freshman. He goes to his first freshman year of high school. And the teacher is like, let's go around the room and everyone tell me a tradition. Tell me something that you do in your family. You know, could be every day, could be once a week, could be once a month, maybe once a year, but what is a tradition for you? And the first kid gets up and he says, well, you know, my mom gets us all up early. We have breakfast all together because we don't have the opportunity to get together after school because everyone has activities and so on. So breakfast, everyone comes together and they have a big, you know, group discussion about what you're going to do for the day or how was your day yesterday. And we all just have that one moment in time to share our family space together. That's our tradition. And the next kid goes and he says, well, our tradition is my mom reads to my brother and sister. They're very young. She reads the same book so often that we don't even need to see the words or the pages. We just know the story because it's just what my mother does with them every single day. And my uncle said, and I stopped right there and said, I don't believe any of that. I don't believe that really happens in families. Because when my mother put me to bed, she said, you get your butt in that room, you shut the door, and I don't want to hear from you until tomorrow. And he looked at me and said, so what do you think about your auntie? I'm like, oh my God, my auntie sounds really mean. And he said, well, why do you think that's how she put me to bed? I want you to think about this. And it brought chills into my skin. It is the way that she was put to bed. It is the way her mother was put to bed. It is the way her mother's mother was put to bed. And how do you think I put my daughters to bed? Until I figured it out. And I thought, if that is just one residual effect from the boarding school, can you imagine what truly and deeply has happened in our communities? You can truly feel that, and you know that it's deeper than that. Sexual violence is a learned behavior. We all have many of those community family stories of sexual molestation. We have domestic violence, we have addiction, we have a lot of different things which are the bigger picture of historical trauma. But even the very structure of our family and the way we raise our children is impacted. In my language, we didn't have a word for niece or nephew because my brother and sister's children are my children. They're my responsibility. That is not the case anymore. The crazy thing is, maybe all of us in this room knew about the boarding school, but I promise you, there are so many people that still to this day think this is actually just a big fallacy lie or never heard it before. You do not find this in history books. You do not find this even in college history. You got to go out and get this information if you want to learn about it until what happened just a couple years ago. All of a sudden in Canada, they're finding children, burials from residential schools in Canada. And people start to talk more about what happened. They start to move through conversations that they've never had before. Did this happen in the US? Yes, it happened in the US. And we had one monumental thing happen. Secretary Haaland issues a memorandum that says we are going to coordinate an investigation. And I know that all of us in this room, if you have not read the report, please go read the report. If you have not looked at the 500+ lists of schools on that report, please check it out. There are over 1,000 that are not on the list. There's a criteria that existed for how this project was carried out. But what it was supposed to do is it was supposed to essentially identify all the federal Indian boarding schools that existed in the United States. It was designed to look for burial sites. It was designed to create a list of children who actually attended the boarding school. And ultimately, they wanted to make sure that it included viewpoints from those who actually attended and experienced the boarding school. So this is ultimately that first report. And I'm not going to go into too much detail because this is going to get too technical. But if you want to learn more about it or you want to talk with me more about the technical report, I'd be happy to talk to you after. But I do encourage you to take a look. I know there are some things that I really think are compelling. This is not just about the children that experience the boarding schools. There's obviously the children that are sitting at our tables with us today that we want to be talking to. But the report to this point has, oh, my watch just found, here's who we need to talk to. Anyone have an Apple Watch that randomly starts talking to you? Yeah. Anyway, there's a lot of information that's available on the report. There's a lot of future activities that are being explored. But getting right to the recommendations, at the end of the day, this is what was recommended from the report. Number one, we want to continue the full investigation because obviously it also was released during the pandemic and there was very little outreach to tribes. I think that could have been really, really helpful in gathering data. They also need to look at identifying surviving attendees. They want to continue to document the experiences, the actual storylines of what had happened in the boarding school. They want to actually look at co-management of sites across the federal Indian boarding school system. One of the big things is the a repository for records. In Lac de Flambeau, we restored the Lac de Flambeau boarding school and created a temperature and humidity controlled archival center within the building. Because when we were searching for records, we could really not, we really didn't find very much, right? The BIA was not forthcoming about what had happened. And I can tell you that there's not a lot of records that are available even to this day. So this is one of the biggest issues that I think we tackled in Lac de Flambeau is just not having information. We don't have to go through all of this, but I know you talked about NAGPRA as well. These are also parts of the recommendation. So again, I encourage you to be part of this report and encourage NATHPO to be part of the next phase. And I know that NATHPO had a role, as I understand it, in the first report. And this is the actual building in Lac de Flambeau after it had been restored. But I do want to tell you what happened. Because as we're going through this process and we're deciding what to do with the building and we're raising funding and we're creating new storylines, I began to get super heavy emotionally. And I found myself in a place that was hard to figure out what's the right thing to do? How do you tell the story? How do you use this building in a way that is going to radiate, information that's not just going to help your own community, but future generations, and also educate the people around us about what had occurred. And one night I went to sleep and I wrote an entire song in my sleep. It was the most healing thing I had done. I literally thought about the little boy who was taken from his mother when he was still nursing. And I wrote this song. Baby boy clings to his grandma's skirt. She speaks to a man using words he's never heard. She reaches down and touches his head. Baby boy, you must go with this man. God, we wish I see wish I see. I don't want to go. God, we wish I see. Oh, I wish I see. Baby boy looks over his shoulder. He sees his grandmother. She's bent over. The tears they fall like a stormy rain. Her heart is breaking. He can feel her. I don't understand. Why did they take children? I don't understand. How will my baby comprehend? Her mom cries, even in her sleep. Just where she hears her baby screams. Grandma prays each and every day. Why did they take my baby away? God, we knew it just see. God, we knew it just see. Oh, God, we knew it just see. God, we knew it just see. Baby boy. Baby boy, through the door of a building, hair on the floor. They cut his hair and they took his clothes and took his picture in an artificial pose. I don't understand. When will I see my again? I don't understand. Why did they take my moccasin? Baby boy, now man no longer speaks. Oh, Chippewa way. He once wore moccasins and sang a song. And now he hardly knows where he belongs. I don't understand. Why did they take my moccasin? I don't understand. Never to see my grandma again. Oh, it was just see. Oh, it was just. I knew that was going to happen. If I see anybody else cry, then I immediately start crying. So thank you for letting me share that with you. But and so that is a song that I wrote. It's called Gawin Niwajasin, which means I don't want to go. I want to talk really quickly about something that was that eye-opening moment, and I want to take us through something that another sort of musical creation, if you will. Just doing a time check, Valerie. 3:30, 3:45, then break. Okay. So let me just talk a little bit about one of the things that happened as I started to create music in that space. I created that song. It actually snowballed into an entire album called Spirit of a Woman, which was about storytelling. It was about, looking at our community, but looking at my own life and how I was using music as a tool to create healing and opportunity. And in Lights Flambeau, I bring together these groups of women often. And we would, have the, brainstorming, take over the universe conversations. You guys have those? I have a group of friends that get together and we think we're going to take over the universe. But this is one of those days where we get together and I said, it was probably 10 years ago or more, maybe 15. And the statistic had come out that said 3 out of 5 indigenous women are sexually violated before the age of 18. 80% of the perpetrators are non-native. And it was a very compelling moment because as I looked at the boarding school and the impacts from our community and our becoming susceptible to so many infiltrations, I realized, is this too one of those residual effects? Is this too something that I'm experiencing in my own community? And there were 7 women sitting around my island. And I just said, this is going to make everyone feel uncomfortable, but I'm going to ask anyway. It's 3 out of 5 indigenous women. There are 7 women. Of all of you here, have you experienced this very statistic? 7 out of 7, including myself. 7 out of 7 indigenous women in my kitchen. The impact is horrendous, and it's something we weren't talking about. I had known these women all my life, and never did we talk about it. We didn't talk about it in our communities. We don't talk about it in our families. We don't talk about residual effects because they're uncomfortable. And so this happened to be something that I was very, very passionate about. Oops, sorry. And that most startling moment for me was when I discovered that I was not alone in that moment of 7 out of 7. So I decided to pull together women, and I wrote a song called Don't Speak. And I pulled indigenous women from all over the state of Wisconsin together and said, I want to do a powerful music video. I want to create some sort of campaign. I want to impact change immediately. I want to do something right now. And so pulling those women together, they gave me the advice to build, this is their storyline. It's basically 4 indigenous scenarios. All of the women here are not actors, and they all are survivors, with the exception of my grandchildren. They were just actors, I suppose.
The clock on the wall doesn't move at all. This dark place inside, feel I should hide. Lost inside and I can't define my own mind. I can't recognize. She cries in the dark, shadows in her thoughts. Shame overcomes what can't be undone. False sweats, torn flesh, lost innocence, my independence. Don't speak, don't hide, don't ask, don't try. It's all you can do to get by. Don't think, don't breathe, don't live indiscriminately. It's what we do to get by. It's how we survive. Yeah. Just stay. It takes the strength of a thousand women to remember me. I'm not alone. I'm not alone. I'm not alone. I'm not alone. I am not alone. I'm a still test, a letter position. I'm a prisoner of my shame. I'm you, I'm strong, I'm trained. I'm worth a valuable life. I'm a woman who can turn to. I speak, I cry, shout, and I'm within. It's what keeps me alive. You're not alone. You're not alone. You're not alone. You're not alone. You are not alone. You're not alone. You are not alone.
Honestly, that was a very eye-opening moment for me, is working with that team of individuals and talking about the various different experiences that each of them had. But again, we never walked away from the conversation without recognizing that we needed to create more awareness, and we actually needed to create change. And with change requires what? Money? Well, funny thing, I had someone say, I'll give you $1 million. What are you going to do with it to impact change? When it comes to missing and murdered Indigenous women or the residual effects of boarding schools. And I said, I have no idea. So I started going out and talking to people much like yourselves in all the different areas. We're working with the U.S. Department of Justice, working with, our culture and our environmental preservationists. We're talking about our community investors. We're bringing together thoughts and ideas. Most importantly, I would like for you to just take home this one message. You can start having this conversation about historical trauma and residual effects and violence against women, MMIW issues, or MMIR issues, if you choose to use that rather. And it's most important is every tribal community is different. We all have our own unique challenges, and we need to focus on the grassroots programs that are going to make a difference for each of us. I'm going to do one more song, and then I'm going to open it up. I'm going to do one more song. This is actually one of the songs that we moved into. It's written about addiction, and it's called Ghost. Hey, oh, 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 hey, oh. Daddy wants to live the life of a legend doesn't really care where he's headed. Half in the land, half on the warpath. He lives his life as if he lived in the past. If you listen, you can still hear his voice. It echoes hollowly through his little voice. His little boy is all grown up too, and he walks alone just like you used to do. He's walking with the ghost of a dead man. He's hoping for his daddy's acceptance. He's talking to the ghost of a dead man. He's living a life of redemption. That wants to live the life of a legend. Doesn't really care where he's headed. Half in the bottom, half on the warpath. Lived his life as if he lived in the past. If you listen, you can still hear his voice. It echoes hollowly through his little voice. His little boy is all grown up too, and he walks alone just like you used to do. He's talking to the ghost of a dead man. He's hoping for his daddy's acceptance. He's talking to the ghost of a dead man. He's living a life of redemption. Is the poison that lives in us, passed down from generation. Well, I know 'cause my eyes are open. I just keep praying and I just keep going. Well, I do want to give you guys time to actually have a brief conversation about the boarding school and what the next steps are for NATHPO. But I do want to leave you with one happy note. When I say I focus on impacting change and recognizing the things in our community that are residual impacts from historical trauma, which they exist in all different formats, awareness is one thing. But one of the things that our team did is start looking at how we could impact change in the lives of our young people. And most importantly, looking at girls. And so how could I do that through music? I created Indigenous Girls Rock Camp. Yeah. That's right. And so IGRC is a program that is designed to teach girls ages 8 to 18 how to play an instrument. They write an original song and they perform for a major music venue. It is an amazing program. It is what feeds my spirit. And I truly am excited about bringing this program to other locations in the US. Right now, we offer this mostly in Wisconsin only. However, music really was a way for these girls to express themselves, and they write rock music. So it's not culture camp. What I mean by that is they're not learning to play flute. They are usually learning to play electric guitar and maybe stomp pedal and a bass. And again, they're little. So the greatest moment in my life is when I had a 9-year-old up with a bass guitar that was bigger than her. And she was like, "What are you doing, Madison?" And I'm like, oh, that's exactly what we're doing. Creating this was an opportunity to give our girls some power and the voice of their own, which is the theme of your conference. So thank you guys for listening. I really appreciate your time and space. This is a video I don't have time to show you because it's we're running out of time. But the girls actually create their own video of expression, and the girls also do media and graphics. So if you're interested, I can certainly share this video with you later. If you're interested in IGRC, you're interested in impact change, you're interested in, I'm also my own owner of a company, InnoNative Solutions, and I do consulting. So I also, what else do I do, Michael? I'm a mother, grandmother, and yeah, right now, a facilitator. So let's move on to what we came here to is, I guess someone can help with the microphone. But I do want to talk about, you know, in your own communities, if you have some suggestions or thoughts about the boarding school project itself or Department of Interior's efforts in the project, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And I'm sure that Valerie would as well. And we do want to try to get you out of here so you can actually have a break. These guys haven't given you a break all morning, and I'm like so excited that you actually hung out here with me.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah. I want to, I do want to say, I know for sure we have you want a really hard stop at 3:45, right?
Ideally, we'd like
Okay.
to give people a break and then we have one more session.
Okay.
Gosh, thanks so much for that.
Yeah.
When the DOI initiative investigation was announced a couple of years ago, and one of our monthly Zoom board meetings, I asked everyone, is there a role for NATHPO in this? And didn't get a clear answer at that time. It's been a couple of years ago. And so that's what I wanted to start with. We got some different answers at the time, and maybe there's not a definitive answer, but it doesn't feel like we should do nothing. And so what do our members want? What do our prospective members want that we might be able to help with at all in this space? Do you have questions, comments for us? Is it an A and B conversation? We need to see our way out. That's an option. I'm asking.
I do know there was some folks that had asked me about the fundraising that we did for the boarding school restoration project itself. And since we were talking about funding, that was a big piece of Flambeau's challenge, was finding resources to actually restore the building, create an interpretive center and archival space. And that really happened with a lot of different things, lots of grassroots. Literally, my cultural committee held car washes every Sunday and benefit bingos, but really we raised money through Preserve America and also through Saving America's Treasures. We also received private funding and were able to restore the project. But we did also work with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, mainly because it was a building that belonged to them. And it was then transferred to the tribe with all kinds of environmental issues, right? I mean, there was asbestos, lead paint, all kinds of stuff. So we kind of threw it, yeah, I'm picking on you, John. We threw it back at the BIA and said, hey, come on now, where's our funding for fixing a building that you gave us that literally has some environmental challenges? And they were able to secure some funding for the actual hazmat of the property. So if anyone's curious about fundraising for the actual project, that would be one thing. But just for me, Valerie, and NATHPO's role, I really feel like you should be providing the guidance or even strategic development of what the next steps are. So if the Department of Interior is moving this project forward, continue the investigation, I feel like the people in this room are the body that can give that agency more guidance on what's the appropriate next step and what's the priorities, because we know this is going to take a long time. And this administration's been supportive, but they may or may not be here in the next few years. So that would be my comment.
Thanks, Kelly. Passes on.
No question.
Yep.
Again, hello. I have a suggestion. What are your thoughts as far as understanding the problem? First, define the problem. The problem is very complex. There are still individuals with us today that have gone through the process either themselves or an elder member of their family, and they have memories. My suggestion is that that you apply for a major grant so that we can capture these verbal stories from each tribe, and then we can start analyzing to understand what the problem is and how to fix it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Others? Are you guys ready for a break? I think they're ready for a break, Valerie.
Well, thank you all for letting me share my story. Thank you all for letting me share my story and letting me share this real unique way of presenting information through music. And I certainly encourage all of you to, reach out if you have any specific questions or inquiries. Thank you again. And big shout out to NATHPO and Valerie and her team and to this facility staff. You guys are doing amazing. Thank you so much for the hospitality of bringing a bunch of music equipment and crabby musicians that have to get up early in the morning. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Kelly. Okay, we